Welcome into Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. Happy Midwest Friday to you all as we get ready for another weekend of Big Ten football. That's Sam Sprunger over there. I'm Dalton Shetler. Sam, let's clock in. How are we doing on this Friday?
Oh, Fridays, and we talked a little bit before we started recording. Fridays are great anyways. It's the end of the work week. You know, you've got football coming, I've got kids that play football in high school, so high school football plays Friday. So it starts my weekend off. I'm ready.
Well, this actually kind of opens the door to a different conversation that we weren't planning on having. But
great. Going off script.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, college football has kind of seeped into Fridays over the years a little bit, where sometimes they'll play a Friday game. Last week, the Big Ten had a Friday game with Purdue, Wisconsin, and they don't this week, but there's going to be more of them later on in the year. Since they've started to do this, I haven't had a real reason to get involved with high school football. I don't have kids yet, so it hasn't forced me that direction. I don't know anybody necessarily locally that's playing on some of the teams.
So drive down here and watch my kids.
It hasn't really affected me, but as somebody who's got an interest and a reason to be watching those things on Friday night, does that bother you that college football is trying to kind of take Friday?
A little bit, not greatly to where I'm so disturbed by it, but yeah, a little bit, just because like last week I had a rooting interest in the game that was being played on Friday night for college, and I was in the middle of doing, I broadcast high school football as well, so I was in the middle of a broadcast while Purdue was playing. Now, it didn't turn out well for the Boilermakers. It was actually a little closer.
It was a good one to miss.
It was a little closer than what that final score was in that mid to late third quarter to early fourth quarter, but I missed the whole first half, and before I could listen to any of it on the ride home. And so, yeah, it bothers me a little bit, but it's not one of those that I'm willing to, throw a big public protest about it. But yeah, it's a little upsetting. And I know that there were some teams in the Big Ten that were not happy about doing Friday nights because of that reason, because we're in the Midwest. Not every region feels that football is tops or is that thing that rules Fridays, but Midwest is one of those, like Ohio, Michigan, in Indiana, even. Fridays are football Fridays in football season and for high school. And so it was a little bit of an issue when they first incorporated it, but the fact that they're only doing basically one when they do have one on Friday, probably eases the blow a little bit.
Remember, high school used to be Fridays and college Saturday and the NFL Sunday, and then you get the NFL Sunday night. Now it just feels like it's just a bird
Monday.
shot.
Don't forget Monday.
All over the week. Yeah, like it's just – now you get Maction in the middle of the week, which I'm not complaining about Maction. I love Maction. I need Maction to get here now so I have something to watch on Tuesdays.
It starts like into week 6 or 7 is when it starts, probably.
Something like that. Yeah.
But what I honestly think the NFL needs to get their minor leagues going, to where they can play those games on Wednesday. Then they have Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday, Monday. They rule most of the week.
Every single day. Yeah, no, it's fair. But okay, let's get into some of the things that you're waiting for us to get into. Okay, so for Big Ten football this past week, we saw 3 walk-off game winners involving the Big Ten, which, it was a fun week. Now, this week's slate is nothing like last week's, but let's talk about one of those walk-off winners. Ohio State beats Notre Dame in South Bend. Ohio State was in control this one, obviously, to halftime. Notre Dame came back, punch back in that second half.
3-0 is a control at halftime.
Fair. It was honestly, like, if we're going to be transparent about it, like, it was a sloppier game for the most part until late. Right. And then Notre Dame scored a couple, got in front, and then Ohio State had the drive where they scored the touchdown from 1 yard out and won the game. And then, of course, we know Ryan Day went on his rant in the post game. That has certainly been attention getting throughout this week. But nonetheless, Ohio State survives and advances on the road in a game that maybe they should have won, maybe they shouldn't have won. Who knows? However you want to dissect this one. But nonetheless, Ohio State walks out with the dub.
I think this, and as you're absolutely right, it was sloppy, but it was sloppy on both sides. The defenses ruled this game, period. Like they stepped up. That's why it was 17-14 final. You know, the defenses for a top 10 game, this was it was a great game to watch because you could see the defenses were just running what was happening. Now, don't get me wrong, Notre Dame had control of it early. Like they were able to drive. They weren't like Ohio State was the bend but don't break type deal of defense, but it just looked like Notre Dame was the better offense in the first half, and maybe overall. But the ending showed a lot to me for Kyle McCord because he didn't fold. This was his fourth start. He's playing a top 10 team on the road, a true road game. And he came through and completed the passes when he needed to. He drove the team when he needed to make the game winner an easy one. And I say easy in air quotes, but the easy handoff to get the touchdown. If I were an Ohio State fan, I'd feel a lot better about Kyle McCord being your quarterback after that week.
And to your point, because he stepped up in the big moments and converted a lot of third, fourth downs on that final drive. What I took away from it, and maybe this is more to do with our Indiana background and the fact that I have Notre Dame relatives that are fans. I thought overall the coaching might have been fine, but there were some glaring issues for Notre Dame in terms of coaching. One being that final drive where they're trying to milk some of that clock before they get the ball back to Ohio State.
Threw the ball twice.
Where was Audric Estime, the nation's #1 running back in terms of rushing yards? Where is he? And then that final play, I mean, to have 10 guys on the field, and look, this has been pretty torn apart throughout the week, and I would say deservedly so I won't rehash a lot of that. But you come out of a timeout and you only have 10 guys on the field in a game deciding play. It can't happen. Like that was really what stuck out to me from that game.
Where do you put the blame if you're going to put the blame on only 10 people? Do you put it on the coach who out of the timeout should know that there's 11? Do you put it on the player that wasn't on the field that was like, these guys are at a top of the country program.
Yep.
Knowing that this is the last play, shouldn't you already know when you are ready, when you're supposed to be on the field? But at the same time, it all comes down to who's in charge, making sure there are 11 gold helmets.
I end up on coaching on that because, and who knows what the communication, if it was ever actually expressed, you know what I mean? Like they're on the sideline because there are so many different packages to your point. Like you are at a top of the line program, but to always understand which formation and everything, like that's the duty of the coach. So I do land on the coach. Now, whether it's Freeman or Al Golden to land on, that part I'm not quite sure of because the defensive coordinator Al Golden, the head coach
defensive coordinator, defensive line coach, defensive
just everybody coach, just circle the staff.
Anybody that has the name coach is addressed to as coach should know. There should be 5 different people counting how many helmets are in that group that's being talked to before it goes on the field.
Yeah.
You know, and granted, your captain that's out there, your defensive captain should be counting too. So maybe 6 different ones. But at the same time, once they're out on the field, that's usually where the defensive captain does the counting.
Yep.
They ain't got no timeouts to call to be able to get the 11th person. That might have been the difference because NBC did a great job. They've got the drone or the camera above hand. They were breaking down where all the defenders were on that play, and Ohio State ran to the opposite side. There might have been another person on that left side of
there's supposed to be somebody there. Like you could see from that aerial shot you're talking about, you could just see like there's a vacant position here, and they just ran it right there, and that was the ball game.
I'm not saying that they wouldn't that one player would have stopped it, but it would have given him a heck of a lot better chance of stopping him. Because let's look at this. They had 2 or 3 different times that they went on 4th and 1, not including this. Was it 3rd or 4th down on that last play? Was it? It was 3rd, wasn't it? Because they clocked it, then threw it outside to Marvin. And
might have been, but there were only 2 seconds, so it was for sure.
So it was a walk-off play. It was technically a 4th down. I mean, if you wanted to look at it, because if not, it was over. But 2 other times they'd been stopped on 4th and 1.
Yeah,
and they had all 11 players those 2 other 2 times, and one of them was on the goal line. So like, you kind of wonder, does Notre Dame stop them if they have that 11th player?
Yeah. No, I that to me is how I'm going to remember what was a great finish, is that part just stands off the page to me so glaringly.
And again, to the Ohio State fans, I'm not saying Ohio State doesn't win that, or they shouldn't get credit for the drive that they made to get down to that position. But at the same time, it's a glaring omission if you don't say, well, they only had 10 players on the field. That's not saying that you wouldn't have won. It's just you were playing 11 against 10, you know?
Yeah. And we've given kudos to the Buckeyes because Kyle McCord in that final drive. Like, I mean, you showed, like, that's from Ohio State's standpoint, what stood out to me is that drive and the composure that Kyle McCord had, the receivers stepping up, doing what they do. So I Ohio State perseveres, survives, advances, and moves on to the next week, which is a bye week for them now. But also last week.
Whoops, I was just one quick thing. But I think that stands out that, you know, Ohio State should come out of this game, even though it was a struggle and they had to win it on the last game or a play, that it is definitely looking better for them.
Agreed. Completely agreed.
They proved themselves with a proven game that in a tough situation where their offense isn't going to be able to produce, their defense can keep the team in the game. I think it says a lot towards what, you know, Ohio State's outlook is. Had they lost that game, I still wouldn't, but that drive would have never happened. You know, if McCord would have struggled, then I'd be like, you know, you might need to, you know, get a lot better. But I think he's done a lot to show himself as being, you know, at least up for the task, the big game task.
And when you find ways to win games, it points to your DNA. And that's something that Ohio State fans should feel pretty good about. Mm-hmm. The other game that we talked a lot about last week was Purdue, Wisconsin, that Friday night game. Sam, as for our new listeners, Sam has a heavy interest in Purdue, is a big fan. The Boilers dropped this one, and things just now look. It's a first-year head coach. Like, the context is necessary here, but things have not looked good here.
No, the defense is still the big thing, and their offense struggled against a team that, you know, is decent on defense. I mean, Wisconsin's known for, you know, their running backs and a good defense. So they struggled against the offense, but at the same time, what they've lost on offense from last year, you could expect that. But with a defensive head coach, you would think, well, the defense is going to be better. But we talked about that last week as well, as their defense is in the middle of converting to what Ryan Walters wants, and the personnel doesn't necessarily match what he wants. So I was hopeful. I'm still not giving up on it, because, you know, that's one game out of 7 or 6 that they're going to play in their division, and what, 9 total. I think they played 9 games, conference games. But this was a game that I thought was winnable for Purdue, and it was one of those that now it makes it, you have to beat Ohio State or Michigan. You have to beat one of, you know, a game that you necessarily weren't going to go into picked to win. And it's a you know, it's going to be something's going to have to change quick, and I don't know that it's gonna.
Yeah. And I should mention the final there was 38-17 Wisconsin, but the Badgers lost a big one. Ches Malusi went down with a fibula injury. He may be out for the rest of the season for Wisconsin. So that was a big blow for the Badgers in that game.
I can't tell you, though, at least in that third to fourth quarter transition, when it was still kind of in doubt as to, you know, Purdue had gotten it to 24 to 10. And then it got to 27-10, and Purdue got it to 27-17. It was still within striking distance, and it didn't sound like the Wisconsin offense. Again, I was broadcasting, so I didn't get a chance to listen to how it played out. But it sounded like the Wisconsin offense was struggling a little bit against Purdue. So I don't know if that's maybe two first-year head coaches, they're still trying to each side's still trying to figure things out, or if that's Purdue is doing a little bit better at times during games, or for portions or whatever of the game, that you can see it maybe turning around eventually here. I don't know.
Well, and I still don't think the Wisconsin offense is necessarily clicking on all cylinders.
Right.
Like, I think there's still some stuff to get figured out there, which I would say is concerning. But look at that Big Ten West division.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we're in a year right now. We're going to talk about this team in a minute. If Maryland was in the Big Ten West, they would win it walking away.
Oh, sure. They could walk out of it on their hands.
The West is just brutal. What a great swan song, a farewell tour this is for it in the final year division,
isn't it?
It is.
Let's make it another circus like it was last year for the swan song. Let's have that.
Oh boy! So we'll talk about some of that in a minute. But speaking of the Big Ten West, I did want to, and this kind of goes a little bit more into the dumpster fire. But I did think there was a neat moment that came out of those flames, that being Northwestern Minnesota last week. Now, we don't need to recap this in great detail, Sam, but I thought the fact that Northwestern, another walk-off game where they score in the first play overtime where they had the ball to win it 37-34, for them to beat Minnesota, tells me Minnesota – not very good, maybe not a division contender. Also, how bad is Nebraska? Because Minnesota beat Nebraska. Uh-huh. But third off, and this is the positive side that I've really chosen to actually look through with this prism. How about Northwestern? I mean, they go through an offseason full of adversity where Pat Fitzgerald, who is the face of Northwestern or has been for decades as either an All-American linebacker or as the winningest coach in program history, he's forced out. And all of a sudden, this Northwestern team has to try and regroup as it heads into the year. And David Braun, who was hired, I believe, from North Dakota State, had never coached at the Big Ten level before in any role, had never coached at the Power 5 level in any role. This was his first Power 5 job. Mm-hmm. He was coming in to be a coordinator, and he gets thrusted into being the interim head coach. And for him and the Wildcats to get a win on that night in overtime against Minnesota, that was one of those moments to me where it kind of encapsulated what's so great about sports. For a group to be able to rally, to come together and pick up a win where Braun said afterwards, AJ Henning, the receiver, kept coming up to him on the sideline and said, "Coach, we got you. Don't worry about it." Not to mention they were down 31-10 in this game.
At the end of 3, it was 31-10.
Like, I thought that was such an inspiring moment out of the Big Ten last week, maybe the most inspiring out of the conference. I thought that was some really cool stuff because, let's be honest, Northwestern was not expected to win, not that game, but hardly any games this year. And for them to do that, that was pretty cool.
Well, and think about that. Any team down 21 going into the fourth, there's not usually much hope that it's going to, I don't care who you are. Even the best of teams, if you're down that much, you're going to have doubters on your team. And it's not going to, even in the coaching staff, we'll pack it up and move on to next week. That's 3 possessions. And for him to come out, or them to come out and score 3 touchdowns in the fourth, take it to overtime, then win it. And I saw somebody had posted on social media the win probability. And at the end of 3, it was like 92% Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And by the fourth, it was 50-50. Like that, and with that team, doesn't matter who they're playing, with that team, because you just laid it out as to why it would be just easier than all get out to pack it up and say, okay, fold. See ya. Mm-hmm. So I that is a feel good story. Now, we're not saying Northwestern's going to turn around and win the West.
No,
but that shows that the kids that they have playing have heart and that they have pride in their program, and they also have they've at least bought into some extent as to what the coaching staff has installed after such a quick. Fitzgerald was fired in late July, wasn't it?
Right before the Big Ten media days.
Yeah, so it wasn't too long ago. Like every one of those kids had interaction and practice, spring practice and everything with Fitzgerald. And now you've got a whole new regime in there doing other things. You got to give it to him. I had no intentions of saying Northwestern would be a certain amount of wins other than 0. And a certain amount of losses other than 9 in the Big Ten.
Yep. It's such an example of what is maybe the most overused word in football, resiliency. Like that was resilience that we saw there. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that deserved a shout out. But I do know we need to get moving to this weekend because there are some games to talk about upcoming. One being Sam's Purdue Boilermakers taking on Illinois. And this is a game where it just feels like both teams are still soul searching for an identity. I don't really know what to make of this one.
No, the only thing I would say, there's 2 things going for Purdue. It's at Purdue, and Purdue's head coach is coaching against his old team.
Yep.
There's that wanting to prove that he. Other than that, yeah, you're absolutely right. You're still searching for your identities. You're not 100% sure as to what's going to play out. Again, if they could figure out how to tie, that would probably be the best outcome for both of the teams. I mean, both teams want to win, but like you don't have an identity. I don't know how you can prognosticate any of this because Purdue shows some life at times.
Yeah,
and shows some like they just show. I mean, it's hard to win in Blacksburg, and they went to Blacksburg and beat Virginia Tech. It's hard to win there. Doesn't matter how good Virginia Tech is or not. It's hard to win there because that's the environment is there. So like for them to be able to do that, but then lay eggs any other time, like I don't know. But you look at the teams they lost to. You've got Wisconsin, who has been ranked and is picked by many to win the West. Syracuse is undefeated, and Fresno State is ranked in the top 25. So like their 3 losses aren't against like cupcakes. But yet they haven't looked good doing it either. I don't know. And Illinois struggled against Toledo. Granted, they won, but they struggled against Toledo, and Toledo is really good. But then the rest of their game, you just don't. Kansas ranked. So like these teams that they're losing to, they're good teams. But it's like a Jekyll and Hyde. I don't know.
Yeah, I really don't know what to make of this one either. And both teams are 0-1 in the Big Ten. So somebody's going to get their first Big Ten win and stay alive in that West discussion because, as we mentioned, the West it's open. Anybody can go get it if they want it. The game that really interests me for this weekend, and not just because the logo of one of the teams is on my forehead, on my ball cap here, but Michigan State and Iowa. The Spartans are going to travel to Iowa City. Michigan State's lost the last 2 games. Last week they lost to Maryland 31-9. And really, the game, I'll say, I thought was closer than that. It just was a lot of turnovers. Like Michigan State's moving the football. Right. They're just shooting themselves in the foot at the same time. And there is a difference between that and just not having ability whatsoever. I think that makes some of this to kind of project even a little bit more difficult because they've shown they can actually move the football. They just aren't taking care of the football. Meanwhile, Iowa went to Happy Valley last week and got blanked. 31-0 Penn State wins, which, by the way, I know we're past the recaps, but Penn State looks legit. I mean, they are for real.
I heard a stat and offense or on for their defense. No team has forced more turnovers than one other team has forced more turnovers than Penn State in the country. But then on offense, Penn State hasn't turned the ball over. How huge is that?
Yeah.
And for a team to have and to say what it is, Iowa's got a good defense. For Penn State to go and put 31 on the board against a defense like that. Now, it's not a shock that they held Iowa to none.
Correct.
Because it's a good defense and we've talked about Iowa's offense.
Iowa holds Iowa to none.
Right. But my point on that one is when they're doing that and they're doing it against, a decent, I mean, don't get me wrong, they've got their couple cupcakes, but they haven't turned the ball over. It's easy to have a quarterback or make a wrong read and throw it to where it gets picked.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't happened. It's easy to maybe hold the ball a little loose when you're playing, Southwest, Eastern, North Dakota State Tech or whatever, that.
Mm-hmm.
to maybe hold a little loose and fumble the ball, and they just happen to turn it over. They haven't done that. That to me is really huge. And then to have a defense that turns the ball, forces the other team to turn the ball over. Penn State, I don't know. I think they're a lot better than what people might give them credit, and there are a lot of people giving them credit.
If we were to pick Big Ten winners after week 4, week 5, whatever it is, I don't know how you come away with another answer than Penn State wins this conference right now.
Yeah.
And I just they've played that much head and shoulders above. Michigan has shown a couple of faults. That doesn't mean Michigan is bad. Look, we're not speaking in absolutes here, but Michigan's shown a couple of faults where Penn State right now looks rock solid. Now, Can that change over the course of the next 8 weeks? Absolutely. But if we were declaring a winner right now, Penn State's the most impressive team that we've seen in the Big Ten. And on the other side of that, we talk about Iowa. They're kind of I look at this match as two boxers who have both been on the verge of being knocked out, and they're just kind of stumbling around. Michigan State and Iowa, I don't know what Iowa does, especially without Luke Lachey. Lachey being out for the rest of the year, Iowa throws to the tight end all the time in that passing game. Yep. And this offensive line isn't as good as some of the older Iowa offensive lines used to be. So they're having a hard time establishing the run game and dominating the trenches. I just don't know what they do. But at the same time, Michigan State is really reeling. Of course, we know about the adversity that's happening there, and the acting head coach, Harlan Barnett, leading the charge. As we said, the last 2 weeks have gone pretty poor, but they've also gone poor against the likes of Michael Penix and Talia Tagovailoa. Those are two dynamic quarterbacks that aren't just great throwers, but they can move.
Cade isn't as good as them.
I will say Cade is different than them.
Okay.
But also from what we've seen this year, Cade's not on that level. And Cade also, I don't think, is 100% healthy.
Yeah.
I think Cade's still working back. Yeah. So his mobility certainly won't be what Michigan State's faced the last 2 weeks in Tagovailoa and Penix. I'm curious what Michigan State can do defensively there. And then I don't know. The spread right now, as we're talking, is sitting at 12 points, Iowa favored.
I believe that.
I was going to say, I have a hard time seeing that.
Honestly, you remember last year's Iowa-Illinois game, 6-3?
Yeah.
I think I'm leaning more towards that type of game.
Agreed. I would agree with that. So that's what, I've been kind of confused. I'm like, man, is it bias that's got me thinking this is a closer than 12-point spread? What is it exactly? But and look, as I said earlier, it's hard to project what Michigan State's going to be week in, week out right now, because last week they did move the football, but they turned it over. And when you're just turning the ball over, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. And going against an Iowa defense, they're susceptible to turning this ball over against this Hawkeye defense. And like I said earlier, too, throughout this week, you're going to be hard-pressed to beat Iowa in a field position battle. That's what Iowa and the Ferences live for, to send Tory Taylor out there and pin you deep and play from there. Which, by the way, that reminds me, there was I was looking over the years, and I landed on 2004. Do you remember anything about the 2004 Iowa-Penn State game, Sam?
You're talking about 20 years, close to 20 years ago, and two teams I don't give two hoots about. So, no.
The final score, I believe, was 6-4. And as I had looked it up,
nope, I don't remember that.
It was I believe it was Iowa 6-2 with 8 minutes and 15 seconds left to go in the game, and Iowa was back deep near their own goal line, and a fourth down was coming up, and Kirk Ferentz decided, you know what? If we punt it here, there's a chance they're going to have it on our side of the 50. What if we took a safety and then we were able to free punt the ball down further and make them go further down the field?
And it worked.
That's what he did. So he ran his quarterback out of the end zone with 8 minutes left in the ball game and gave the ball back to Penn State. And it worked. I'm telling you, I pulled it up on YouTube to watch it, and I was so just perplexed staring at it. I'm like, that is amazing. How is this not folklore in Big Ten history? We should be talking about this all the time.
How many in history How many college games have ended 6-4? That's my question.
And my other question is, how many times has there been an intentional safety taken with 8+ minutes to go in the ball game? I mean, it was amazing. So
I'm sure if they asked Kurt Ferentz about it this week, he'd be like, well, that's good trivia. And just
I think you'd see a grin come across though too. Like he'd be like, yeah, that's right. That's right. That's how we play.
Oh goodness.
But yeah, so with this game, Iowa, Michigan State, I really don't know what to do with it. But I do think, I mean, as I said earlier this week, somebody's got to win. And for both of these teams, it might provide an on-ramp to maybe try and get back on track a little bit. Because both these teams are better than what they've shown so far. So I'll be curious to see who comes out of that one. But we talked about this, and this is the team that beat Michigan State last week. Maryland, we haven't been able to break them down much. They're hosting Indiana this weekend. It provides an opportunity for, I believe, since they've been a Big Ten member, to go 2-0 in Big Ten play for the first time ever. They're sitting at 4-0 right now. I don't believe they've ever been 2-0 in Big Ten play. If they beat Indiana as they're expected to, be 2-0 in conference play, be 5-0 for the season, the Terps are pretty good.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate, like you said, that they're not in the West rather than in the East, because
they would win the West.
Right now, they're finishing fourth. They're not gonna. I don't believe that they're gonna supersede any one of those three that are at the top. I really just don't see it. It doesn't matter to me if either of those three teams lose one, maybe even two games. They're not going to supersede any of those. The way that all three of those top teams are playing, I just don't see Maryland breaking into that top three. But you're right. Believe it or not, I've listened to more of their games than most, because a lot of Saturday nights I'll be traveling, or like when Maryland's playing, like I'll have it on the satellite radio, and they'll
Johnny Holiday.
Yeah, and I'll be listening to them, and it's just they're pretty sound. But it sounded to me up until maybe against Michigan State, they had really slow starts. If they prevent that from happening, they're going to be even better than we think that they could be.
Yeah, and look, especially in college football, like there was a time, I feel like a decade ago, you could win college football games with serviceable quarterback play. Now it takes elite quarterback play to win in today's college football game. I think that is, like, I remember the days of Bama just making their way to national championships by just throwing Goliaths on that offensive line, and that's all you needed. And I feel like it's different now.
Think about this real quick. Craig Krenzel is a national champion quarterback.
This is what I mean. And that's not a slight against Craig, but like he was he was serviceable, but like you need dynamic game changers. Mm-hmm. And Talia is a game changer. And I think that gives Maryland a shot in a lot of those. And as you mentioned, if it wasn't for the Big Ten East having 3 top 7 teams in the country, top 6, top 7.
Yeah. Well, right now, Michigan is number 2, Penn State's number 6.
Okay.
So that means Ohio State's in between those two.
Yep.
So top 6, 3 top 6 teams.
And the West doesn't have a team in the top 30. Like
Iowa got beat and they were number 25. So
yeah, like or else this could really have been a pretty. And I think this still will be a special year for Maryland, even if it doesn't end up in winning a championship. But I do think they've been playing at a pretty high level, and I think that's certainly a storyline to watch as the season moves on.
Well, anytime anybody that plays IU, I'm rooting for them. So go
on. We should also bring up here too. We mentioned Michigan State's going to go to Iowa, and that's the Spartans' first road game of the season. Michigan also will go on the road for the first time this year. They're heading to Lincoln, Nebraska. It's a 3:30 kick on Saturday. Number 2 Michigan goes to Nebraska, and I think Michigan is going to control this one. I don't think the actual game itself really has much of a question to it. Nebraska's shown it's just too much in a rebuilding stage right now to compete in this one. At least that's how it looks through the first 4 weeks.
Right. I agree. It's Michigan's first road test, and I put test into the parentheses or into the air quotes there, but we've gone through their schedule. The way it looks is their first test is going to be Penn State on Veterans Day this year. So
that is so crazy.
Yeah, but that could be a detriment too if they don't get tested anywhere. What are they going to do when they come in against a tough team like Penn State? Are they going to be able to take a punch in the mouth and recover from it? I'm not saying that they're not going to be able to. They may have enough Jimmies and Joes that will allow them to take a punch in the mouth and they can recover. But my point is that they don't know that until then.
Mm-hmm.
And if Michigan State doesn't turn it around to where they're not shooting themselves in the foot all the time, it may be until November 11th before Michigan feels a real true test. And that might be their shortcoming is they didn't get tested early enough to know what to adjust, what to turn around, that they may, because after that it's only 2 more weeks and then they play Ohio State.
Right.
2 weeks. So, I mean, it's difficult I think that they're a really good football team, but you just don't know when teams get tested, whether or not it's gonna, they're gonna be able to recover from it. So I don't know. I figured Penn State would lose to Michigan, and the way that both teams are playing right now, I would say Penn State. If they were playing this week, I would pick Penn State, I think.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. And you know what's interesting about some of that? I mean, the fact that like you're saying Michigan won't have a test until November 11th. Like from what I can recall, and I know this is going against the grain a little bit on Big Talk, a Big Ten focused show.
Right.
This seems like a softer year than I can remember in Big Ten football. Like it just isn't as competitive, I guess, or as top as it has been in the past, because there's been years where it can go toe to toe with the SEC,
sure,
and might just be the best conference in football. This year, it might be the third best or so. Like to
right
me,
now, I think Pac-12 is one of the best, if not the.
I think it is the best, and I did not have that on my radar or my bingo card before.
Talk about a swan song, huh?
I mean, it is simply unbelievable.
But yeah, Lincoln Riley giving bulletin board material to Colorado before they play this week, saying I want all of them. I want to see that, I want it all from them. What you wish for.
The Pac-12 is actually a lot of fun. I don't remember a time where the Pac-12 was like this fun to watch week in, week out, and it is this year. If you look
at the top 10, if you were to take next year's Big Ten has 6 of the top 10 teams in the country.
So once those West Coast teams come in here, and look, I mean, the Big Ten normally is much, I feel like, stronger than what it is this year. I just feel like it's a down year for the Big Ten. You got Penn State up there. We're still trying to figure out some things about Ohio State, even though they proved they could win on the road in a tough environment. We're still trying to figure out if Michigan has some flaws with its running game. But ultimately, like, the Big Ten's normally stronger than what this year provides, but you bring in Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA. Like, this is about to get really fun for the coming years. And should be, like we said, a lot of fun. So that's what's coming up this weekend in Big Ten football.
Real quick.
Go ahead.
Of those games, I'm not going to eliminate any. Which do you think is the most expensive and the cheapest to go to?
Oh, let me pull up the slate. Hang on. So I'm going to go with the most expensive out of this weekend's games. I'm going to guess Iowa.
Okay. And the cheapest?
Cheapest, I'm going to go Rutgers and Wagner.
You were correct. Iowa, Michigan State is the most expensive ticket to get at $55 a pop.
Okay.
The cheapest, Maryland and IU, $7.
What? Oh, well, we got to get ourselves to College Park. And
Rutgers and Wagner is $10.
The East Coast is just really piling up the change here, huh?
Yeah, and it's $26 to go to Lincoln and watch the Wolverines play the Huskers.
Nebraska fans just always show out no matter what. They just do.
Here's one that baffles me, and it has to be because who's coming in is Penn State at Northwestern, $21.
Oh, okay.
It has to be because Penn State's coming in.
Yeah, I'm thinking so too.
But
That's
fun stuff.
Yeah, I always love playing the expensive versus cheap tickets in Big Ten football. But all right, that's going to close us out for another edition. Sam, real quick before we finally say goodbye, you want to let everybody know where they can find us?
Yeah, we got the TikToks, the Instagrams, and the platform formerly known as Twitter. It's at B1G_talk, B1G, Dalton, not BIG. B1G_talk, big talk. Yes. Number. This is number 1. Looks exactly like that. Go to Facebook. It's B1G Talk. Not all big talk, but just big talk. And that's where you'll find us on Facebook. You can find us every week on the ASAP network. We stream live there. And then the audio version, podcast version, and also our video and audio on Spotify comes out later that day through Lounge Media, the Lounge Media Group. And, like I said, find us anywhere you can listen to podcasts. And if you have to watch us, go to Spotify.
If you have to. I mean, who doesn't want to see these?
Who doesn't want to see the fun shirts that I wear? I mean, come on. Goats on the Roof. An amazing place.
Is that a Chicago bar or
no? It's a place. There's 2 locations. There's one in Georgia, but then there's one in Pigeon Forge, which is really near. Really
yeah. And I drove by that and I said,
there
"What
are literal goats on their roof?"
Really?
Yes, it's amazing. I accidentally we were lost one time in Pigeon Forge. I was trying to get to our cabin and I turned the wrong way. Our van turned the wrong way. And I won't tell you exactly what I said, but oh my goodness, there are real goats on that roof.
That is awesome. That sounds so Pigeon Forge too.
Yes,
so
yeah. Well, and it is a draw. They now have a roller coaster thing there. They have an ice cream, like a high quality ice cream parlor there. You can feed the goats on the roof, but the roof is all grass. So like when it's not raining and stuff, the goats will be out there and they'll be eating the grass or playing around or whatever. And then all the tourists, they have little bicycles that are connected to a chain that runs the feed up to them. As soon as those goats hear that chain running, they run to that.
No kidding.
Wait for the feed to come up so you can feed the goats. So Goats on the Roof. Pigeon Forge, you're welcome.
Anybody wants to go feed some Michael Jordans and Tom Brady's on the roof in Pigeon Forge? That's the place.
Wouldn't that be a great if they could manage enough money to get like Tom Brady to make a show and he just walks out there with a goat hat or something?
Goats on the roof.
Just walks out there. Just
that is awesome.
Anyways, yeah.
Well, that'll do it for another edition of Big Talk. Thank you all so much for tuning in and joining us. And for Sam Sprunger, I'm Dalton Shetler. Until next time, so long.
See ya.